The 14th year of Chenghua. Arc 1. The case of the Marquis of Wu'an estate. Chapter 1. Floating like a roaming cloud. In the imperial capital. As noon approached, two men emerged from Huanyi Tower. The one in front looked to be a pompous young master, a pretty little rich boy with his fair face that was scattered with stubble. His loose outer robe hung stiffly upon his body as though it were hanging on a bamboo pole. Beneath his eyes were dark, umber shadows. After walking several steps, he gave a great yawn. Behind him was his young servant who blindly followed him. Not daring to neglect him in any way, the servant held an umbrella for him with one hand, while carrying a lantern in the other, the light of which had already been extinguished. Those who caught sight of this would avoid the two men one by one as they passed them by. Huanyi Tower was a brothel, but surely there would be other reasons to this than that. The rules of the brothels were that they should only open their doors to clients at night. So, having this one emerging from the building in the middle of the day, it could only mean that this pompous young master wasn't only fooling around all night, but he had also fooled around all morning. And his background was one that was so influential that the Huanyi Tower had no choice but to break their own rules. Now, this sort of person wouldn't be much if he were good-tempered. But if he weren't, then he could easily start something, and those who would suffer as a result would be the powerless commoners. Therefore, it was only natural that they would put some distance between themselves and him at first sight. Since they couldn't afford to piss him off, they go out of his way instead. The pompous young master's eyes suddenly flashed brightly, his gaze was fixed precisely on something in front of him. The servant, not quite understanding it, simply followed his eyes, and suddenly, it became clear. Before them was someone slowly walking in their direction, already not very far from them. This other man was wearing a similar robe. However, just because their robe styles were similar didn't mean that it would look just the same on anyone else. If it looked like it was hanging on a bamboo stick on that young master, then on this other man, it resembled that of a breeze rushing through a silver jade tree, giving him an elegant and sharp appearance. Had a more cultured person been here, they just might have quoted a line or two of poetry, something like, weightless, resembling the clouds above, powerful, like that of a dragon caught off guard. However, it was obvious that this young master was incapable of saying anything thoughtful or meaningful. He could only stare at him intensely, as if light were going to shine out from his eyes, before taking a few light steps in his direction to start a conversation. Well, who might this young lord be? Where do you want to go? The servant groaned inwardly to himself. To think that their family's young master was such a lecher. His lustfulness, which hardly wavered regardless if his subject was a man or woman, was really going to be the death of him. He could just flag down whatever person around that happened to catch his fancy in the middle of the street. All around the streets of the capital were high officials and noble people. Though his family had a large influence, all it took was an accidental run-in with an imperial censor for them to be accused of misconduct. And it wouldn't be the first time, either. Who knew that the young man that he attempted to seduce only furrowed his brow, before announcing aloud this man's identity? Aren't you Zheng Cheng, the eldest son of the Marquis of Wu'an? The young servant was first taken aback. But in his many years beside this family's young master, he had developed good eyes, and was able to determine right then that this other man wasn't a son or nephew related to the Marquis of Wu'an in any way at all. He immediately retorted, "You've got some nerve. You think that you're worthy of saying our family's heir's name?" The young man cupped his hands in greeting, as the servant so wished. "My apologies. However, according to my knowledge, the imperial court has yet to issue your family's young master the title of heir or prince, have they? If someone were to investigate your calling him that, they'd find you in violation of the imperial government. And if they were to impeach you before His Majesty, then you will implicate the eldest son of the Marquis as well." The servant's brow became beaded with sweat at these words, increasingly afraid for being rash, and said, "This lowly one has spoken insolently. Please forgive me, young lord." Zheng Cheng, however, was really one of a kind. Though all these were already spoken, he still proceeded recklessly. He began to laugh in a slovenly manner as he spoke. "Well, beautiful, since you already know who I am, that just makes things easier. Why don't we find a place and share a few drinks and chat?" His lustful eyes swept across the other man's body. If he could, he would have pulled off every layer of the man's clothing with just his gaze. The young man smiled. "Very well. How about Censor Xian's home in the east of the city for that chat?" The servant gave quite a start. He did not dare look down on this other man any longer. He quickly took a step forward, just barely in time to stop his young master from extending his claws. Cupping his hands together, he said, "Our young master drank quite a bit last night, and is now feeling quite intoxicated." His words, as a result, may be somewhat impolite. "I must ask the young lord to please forgive us. May I have this young lord's name?" The other man only smiled. "Your question is quite interesting. How could I give you my name? If you were to return home to your Marquis and tell him all that's happened, won't I be the one to face the consequences?" The servant, after being seen through, could only look on with wide eyes as the other man walked away. Only after did he brush the sweat from his brow and give a sigh of release, thinking to himself, "That was close." Those who belonged to the official residence of the Marquis of Wu'an, when confronted with the three characters belonging to Censor Xian, react the way that a little mouse would upon seeing a cat. You couldn't count the number of those who received titles from their fathers in the Ming Dynasty. Some of them were conferred right from the Zhou family, while others were conferred by a whole host of different families. From the time of the Hongwu Emperor until now, titles were practically a dime a dozen. And when there's too many, it's not like there's any worth in having one anymore. At the same time, the imperial censors rivaled them in their arrogance. They'd even dare to voice outspoken criticisms that bring a scowl to the emperor's face. If they ever knew that the eldest son of the Marquis of Wu'an was trying to accosting a good citizen in broad daylight, they would most likely rush to urge the emperor to remove his title. Moreover, that young man earlier certainly didn't seem like an ordinary citizen. After all, what ordinary citizen would speak to the eldest son of the Marquis of Wu'an with such a tone, while knowing full well who he was? "You wanna die or something? Why did you dare to drag me into your mess?" Zheng Cheng, after having lost something potentially good, turned into a disgruntled eldest child. "Young master, I had just rescued you," the servant thought. At the same time, he smiled apologetically and said, "Master, the Marquis is most likely waiting for us at home. If we get back late, he just might beat you. Let's take some caution, shall we?" At the reminder his old man, young Master Zheng, seemed to have sobered. He could not help but shiver somewhat, before refraining from making another sound. The servant returned home with Zheng Cheng. At the same time, he turned around and looked back. The other man had already walked on quite a long time. How could the servant have caught sight of his figure? However, he could not help but turn this matter over and over in his head. Just who was that? Tang Fan only slept past midnight before someone shouted at him to wake. The person who had gone searching for him was a Yamen messenger surnamed Wang, who was also a member of the Shuntian prefecture. He had come in the middle of the night and pounded wildly on the gates. Luckily, only Tang Fan resided in this courtyard. Otherwise, someone would think that there were robbers trying to break in. As soon as he opened the gates, he was met with Lao Wang's anxious face. "Master Tang, something serious has happened. Please come along with me." Tang Fan blinked twice. He was only wearing his inner robes, and his expression betrayed hints of sleep. "What do you mean by serious?" Lao Wang lowered his voice, and said, "A homicide has taken place." If it was something so serious that it made Lao Wang rush to his door in the middle of night, burning with anxiety as he did, then it surely wasn't an ordinary homicide. "Who was the victim?" Tang Fan asked. The eldest son of the Marquis of Wu'an, Zheng Cheng. Lao Wang said. Tang Fan stared blankly for a moment. Instantly, much of his drowsiness left him and he had become much awake. The very year that Zhu Yuanzhang became emperor, he had conferred titles upon all of the ministers who had helped him to seize power. Afterwards, he had killed many of them by his own hand. There were some who had stood on the wrong side of the Jingnan campaign that were later killed by the Yongle emperor. The majority of the remaining nobles with inherited titles have descended from the subjects who had achieved outstanding service, and were conferred by the Yongle emperor. As such, these titles were simply passed down from generation to generation. Others were conferred titles during the year of the Tuma crisis. A decent amount of which had some power they could lead troops and have them defend certain areas, but those without as much luck could only remain in the capital and enjoy a life in retirement, like the family of the Marquis of Wu'an involved in this homicide case. If they weren't careful, and became involved in some sort of incident, then their titles would be taken away from them in an instant. It seemed that with things as they were, the reality was like that of someone drinking water, whether or not it was hot or cold, only the person drinking would know. For these kinds of people, even a title like heir apparent would need to be approved by the emperor before it can go into effect. You couldn't just have a son with the legal wife and declare him the household heir. If the emperor didn't look upon him fondly, then he might just take 10 or 20 years to sit on the matter, or he might find an excuse to get rid of the title altogether. As a result, the pompous young master of those descended from feudal aristocrats would most likely be unable to compare to even a 7th-rank official in the capital. The first generation of the Marquis of Wu'an was an outstanding subject of the Jingnan campaign. It has been 4 generations since then. Zhenying had only inherited his title last year. He had a naturally solemn and prudent disposition, and never dared to bring up the inheritance of titles outside so as to avoid any trouble. Who knew how it was that he would have such a mediocre son? The Marquis of Wu'an practically wore his heart out over this boy. Scoldings and beatings became a fact of daily life from then on. In the end though, scoldings and beatings were simply what they were. He hated his son for never living up to expectations, but Zhenying never thought of killing him. At that moment, both his eyes were thoroughly red, and his expression was ghastly pale. He stood outside of Zheng Cheng's room with both hands behind his back, not uttering a single word. The small courtyard was lit ablaze and filled with people. Men and women in the family were present, so that they could avoid suspicion. Some were terrified, while others were wailing. All of this noise made for a great disorderly mess. By the time that Tang Fan rushed there, Pan Bin, the Shuntian prefecture magistrate, had already arrived. He was speaking with Zhenying at that moment. As he was rushed by Lao Wang, Tang Fan did not have time to put on his official robes and went out wearing his informal clothes. However, the moment that Pan Bin caught sight of him, he waved him over, runking. "Come here, quickly." "Good evening, Marquis of Wu'an and Prefect Pan." Though the atmosphere was as tense as it was, Tang Fan, on the other hand, did not appear to be nervous or afraid at all. He still remained the way he normally was, never tense, and never slacking. Compared to those around him, he instead seemed quite special. Zhengfu, the young servant that stood in the middle of this group of people, could not help but let out a small ah as he pointed at Tang Fan. "Aren't you that man we saw earlier today?" The moment he said this, a number of people immediately began to cast sidelong glances. Pan Bin, afraid that this would lead to some sort of misunderstanding, anxiously said, "I haven't finished introducing him. This is the Shuntian prefectural prefect, Tang Fan, courtesy name Tang Runking. He is a quick wit and bright, quite adept at solving cases. The reason why I had him come here was for this very matter." Zhenying's eyes lit up. Though he himself did not participate in the affairs of the state, he had heard of Tang Fan's name before. But mere rumors such as these could never live up to seeing the person himself. A shame that his son was met with such a sudden death. Zheng Ying did not have the thought to exchange any greetings. He could only ask directly, how on earth did this happen? As the Marquis of Wu'an's cold eyes swept over him, Zheng Fu quickly spoke the reason. Tang Fan cupped his hands together. This morning, I had shared some disagreements with your young master. I must ask Marquis of Wu'an to forgive me. Zheng Ying sighed and said, my son is ill-mannered. He was probably the one who had run into you, Master Tang, so what does it have to do with you? If he hadn't already, I would have given him such a scolding. As he said these words, his expression betrayed such anger, disappointment, and sorrow. Though Tang Fan was a minor 6th-rank official, his reputation and background was not a trivial one. Zheng Ying naturally regained composure. I must ask Marquis of Wu'an to restrain his grief, Tang Fan said, and tell us that which has happened to your young master. Zheng Cheng was a spoiled son with rich parents. This fact was true without any doubt in the world. His overindulgent lifestyle was embodied by his lustful and flirtatious lifestyle. Men or women were fine to him so long as they were beautiful. He had even disliked how few wives and concubines there were in the house, going so far as to having a kept woman outside of his home. In the end, he wound up spending his days running about in the red light districts. It was because he was always seeking pleasure that his mannerisms were criticized. Therefore, the imperial court was slow in conferring him the title of heir, in the end never granting it. This often left the Marquis of Wu'an, Zheng Ying, both resentful and at a loss. Today, Zheng Cheng had returned from Huanyi Tower in the middle of the day. The moment he got back, he ran right into his old man, Zheng Ying, who inflicted a torrent of curses and abuse onto young Master Zheng. He was even forbidden from leaving his room. Zheng Ying had assumed that all would be peaceful for a few days. But who would have known that, the moment he turned his head, that his son had ended up fooling around with a servant girl. After 4 hours, Zheng Ying was urgently asked to report to his superior. By then, Zheng Cheng was sprawled out naked on his bed, and his breathing had stopped. Kneeling beside him was the servant girl, improperly dressed and sobbing quietly. According to the servant's descriptions, this had all happened while the hour of high was approaching. Zheng Cheng just happened to meet a servant girl outside named Alin. The moment he laid eyes on Alin's good looks, he instantly became aroused, and led her to his bedroom. Alin was not completely willing, having yielded only after putting on a show of reluctance. The two of them bickered for a moment outside the door before finally deciding to enter. Zheng Fu remained by the doorway, and did not enter. After as long as it took for a stick of incense to burn, he heard Alin's shriek from inside the room. Zheng Fu hastily pushed the door open and entered. And there, he saw Zheng Cheng lying unconscious on the bed. He quickly ran out and called for help. And all the events that took place after didn't need much explaining. It would be reasonable to say that, with Zheng Cheng's overindulgence, it was only a matter of time before he made himself sick. However, now that his son was dead, Zheng Ying couldn't possibly scold him any longer. It then fell to the servant girl to bear the consequences of potentially causing his death. Zheng Ying's sorrow of losing his child, as well as his fury over the disgrace of the Marquis of Wu'an's official residence after suffering such a scandal, would be taken out on this single servant girl. However, this was where the problem lies. Had this servant girl been a contracted slave, then Zheng Ying could have dealt with her however he wanted. He could have secretly killed her and stuffed her body in a well, and found some sort of excuse to cover it all up. Family scandals rarely constituted public attention, much less the labor of the Shuntian prefecture. The difficult part was the fact that this servant girl worked for an upstanding family, and did not have a contract of servitude with the Marquis' residence. Since she was not a contracted slave, they couldn't just kill her because they wanted to. If the Marquis' residence had dealt with it in such a thoughtless manner, then on some other day, it would have turned into an information that could have been used against them. Someone as prudent as Zheng Ying would not have dared to let this happen. Chapter End. The 14th year of Chenghua. Chapter 2. Things have taken a new turn, the cause of death rather strange. The servant girl's arms were tied behind her back with the rope looped around her neck. Her body was covered in wounds, with both of her cheeks bearing faint handprints. It seemed like the discipline she received from the Marquis of Wu'an's household after the incident took place was by no means light. Her hair and clothes were completely disheveled, partly from being forced to kneel. One could still faintly make out her delicate beauty. "May I have your name?" Tang Fan asked. "This servant's name is Alin," she replied. "Please tell us again about the events of this evening," Tang Fan said. The servant girl began to speak through her violent sobs. Her account actually did not stray far from what Zheng Fu had said. The only difference was that Alin claimed, over and over again, that nothing had happened between her and Zheng Chen within the bedroom. Zheng Ying laughed and coldly said, "You're only saying all of this so that you can rid yourself of guilt. Let me ask you one thing, you were supposed to serve the front courtyard, so why would you run to the rear courtyard, much less happen to pass by the eldest young master's court? Clearly this is a matter of a lowly girl reaching for skies not meant for her. But who would have thought that by the time he died, you would suddenly be so keen on washing your hands of having any relations with him at all? By the time I burst in, the two of you hadn't even been properly dressed. Even Zheng Fu said that he had stood outside your door for as long as a stick of incense takes to burn, so how could you possibly say that nothing had happened between the two of you? Perhaps you want me to find someone to do a thorough examination of you so that you can finally tell us the truth." Alin sobbed as she spoke, "Marquis of Wu'an, please use your clear judgment. The exchange which took place between the eldest young master and I was completely innocent. After we entered the room, the young master said that he felt very hot and began to pull off his clothes. Immediately after, he said that he felt dizzy. I helped him sit down, and we began to speak. Then, as we were talking, the young master suddenly collapsed on top of me, and then, Zheng Fu burst through the door." Zheng Ying did not have any interest in arguing with a servant girl. He only looked at Pan Bin and said, "Master Pan, look at this despicable servant. She won't even admit her sins on her deathbed. It looks like I'll have to trouble Master Pan to deal with her personally." Pan Bin anxiously responded, "Marquis of Wu'an, please calm down. If she truly does have something to do with the death of your young master, then I shall rightly discipline her as per the law." Zheng Ying clearly did not seem satisfied with this half-hearted response. Pan Bin glanced meaningfully at Tang Fan. It was then that Tang Fan asked Zheng Fu, "Does Alin's account have any discrepancies? This servant does not know what went on between the young master and Alin after they entered the bedroom, but everything else fits correctly," Zheng Fu said. "From the moment you went out and called for help, how much time passed?" Tang Fan asked. "About a quarter of an hour," Zheng Fu said. "Did anyone come to the room within that period of time?" Tang Fan asked Alin. "Not at all," Alin said. "Marquis of Wu'an, where is young Master Zheng's body?" Tang Fan asked. "It is inside his room. I would like to take a look." "You may do as you wish, Master Tang," Zheng Ying said. The coroner had also arrived by then, so he and Tang Fan both entered the room together. The two of them pushed the door open, only to be met with the sight of a room put completely in disorder. Zheng Chen laid upon the bed, his clothes a mess. His body still had some residual warmth, however his expression was pale. His breathing had long stopped. The coroner squatted down by the body, prying open Zheng Chen's eyelids. He then extended one hand and inspected each of his four limbs. Tang Fan examined all four corners of the room, before noticing that the coroner still remained where he was. "Have you found anything?" he asked. The coroner hesitated for a moment, before responding, "I haven't found any clear physical wounds. However, it doesn't seem as though he died from excess yang brought about by intercourse. Tang Fan nodded with a somewhat furrowed brow. He then followed the coroner and gave another inspection of the body as well. Master Tang, have you found something? The coroner asked. Let's talk outside first, Tang Fan said. The moment that the two of them exit the room, Zheng Ying and Wei Yu caught sight of them as they walked out. They immediately asked, "What have you found?" The coroner's words meant little in Tang Fan's presence. Knowing this, he did not speak first, and instead looked in Tang Fan's direction. By then, Tang Fan pulled out a white, porcelain bottle that he had found from under the bed. He gave it to Alin and asked, "You don't happen to possess something like this, do you?" The servant girl shook her head in flat denial. He then asked the servant Zhang Fu, who hesitated in talking for quite some time before admitting that he recognized it, and said, "The pills within that bottle are named Fuang Chun. It can be used to invigorate one's yang energy and nourish the kidneys." The prescription was collected by the young master himself, while the medicine was prepared by an outside pharmacy. Anger and resentment filled Zheng Ying upon hearing this. To think that he had unceasingly spent such time seeking pleasure. He was so young, and yet he used such a medicine for added excitement. Had he not already died, Zheng Ying would have savagely beat his unfilial son. At that moment, he believed more and more that his son had died spontaneously from intercourse when he had begun to make love to the servant girl. He wished with all his might that he could have taken a sword that second and cut down the slut that had made an attempt to seduce someone of his household. Tang Fan took out a pill from the porcelain bottle and took a sniff of it. He said something under his breath, before asking, "Marquis of Wu'an, where are the wives and children of the young master? I would like you to bring them out, as well as everyone else he had come into contact with this evening. The others are free to leave." Zheng Ying did not know what it was that Tang Fan wanted to do. However, he was quite cooperative. In a moment, he had called out all who Tang Fan had asked for. Zheng Cheng had 1 wife and 3 concubines. That didn't seem like a lot, but this was because he liked looking for wildflowers outside. No matter how beautiful a woman he took into his threshold was, he would get tired of her in no more than 3 days. Therefore, starting from when he began to be sexually active at 15, there were altogether only 4 women that could stay by his side for very long. The first wife, Zheng Sunqi, was the niece of the Count of Yingcheng. She came from a renowned aristocratic family that was equal in rank to the household of the Marquis of Wu'an. In those days, the fact that their marriage was both socially and economically well matched was lauded as a stroke of good fortune. Now, Zheng Sunqi had become a widow at a prime age of 24. With Zheng Cheng's promiscuity, it wasn't as though their relationship as husband and wife would have been any good. However, Zheng Sunqi was known far and wide as a kind and understanding woman. Even Tang Fan once heard of this reputation of her. Among the 4 women who stood before them, only Zheng Sunqi's expression was still and pale, while the other 3 women bowed their heads and wiped their tears. Zheng Sunqi did not speak, though the traces of her tears clung to her face. It seemed that the news had left her in such sorrow that she could only cry soundlessly now. Even Zheng Ying comforted her with a gentle voice, "Daughter-in-law, you've been married to this Marquis household for 5 years bow and cared for us, your mother and father-in-law, with such devotion, as though we were your own kin. The truth is that our Zheng family owes you a great deal. Now that my unfilial son has passed away so early without leaving you with an heir to raise, I will arrange a day where we can discuss things with your family and send you back home, so that your good years do not go to waste." Zheng Sunqi responded in a hoarse voice, "Father-in-law, there is no need to speak excessively. This wife will fulfill her utmost role. Now I can only hope that my husband will be put to rest as early as possible." Zheng Ying sighed deeply, and did not say anything else. The names of the other 3 concubines were the following: Wan Niang, Hui Niang, and Yu Niang. Wan Niang was the oldest. She was a beautiful middle-aged woman and had been the first to have spent her life alongside Zheng Cheng. She had even entered the household earlier than that of Zheng Sunqi. She had an honest and reserved character. Her presence in the Marquis' household was one that was rarely felt. Hui Niang was the most beautiful. In the past, she was Zheng Cheng's favorite for a brief period of time. Yu Niang was the youngest and the most pampered. Before Zheng Cheng had passed away, she was the most beloved of the three concubines. At this very moment, each woman's expression was unique in their own way. Wan Niang cried silently as she hid behind Zheng Sunqi. Hui Niang wailed loudly, so much that Yu Niang could not have outdone her. However, so sweet and lovable was the sight of Yu Niang that it would have made a lasting appeal upon those who caught sight of her. It was clear that she was not pampered without reason. For those who were skilled at investigating other people like Tang Fan, he could easily make out the fact that the relationship between the two concubines Hui Niang and Yu Niang was not an entirely peaceful one, though no one said a word about them. Between these women, fighting for the affections of their man was almost certainly a part of their daily routine. Tang Fan picked up the white porcelain bottle again, and asked each of them if they had ever seen such a thing. Of course, each woman denied it. He once more asked them where they were when the incident took place, and each woman relayed their alibis clearly, with their maids verifying them, so it seems that they weren't lying. Zhen Ying looked on as Tang Fan repeated this process time and time again, before he could not help but to ask, "Master Tang, do you have anything else that you need to ask?" He believed that the proof of guilt here was absolutely clear, and that there was really no need to keep asking these questions again. Just take that shameless maid and bring her out to be punished, and it'd be over with quickly and effortlessly. Why must they drag in these irrelevant people and question them for so long? Could it be that they were trying to make the servant girl out to be innocent? "I have asked all that I needed to," Tang Fan said. "I must ask Pan Prefect and the Marquis to speak with me when you have a moment." Zhen Ying had everyone present return to their rooms, before leading the two men into his study. "If you have anything to say, Master Tang, say it in its entirety," Zhen Ying said. "I must ask Marquis of Chuan, was the young master afflicted with an ailment since childhood?" Tang Fan asked. Why was he even asking such a pointless question? Zhen Ying responded, while trying to restrain his irritation, "Yes, he was." "Was he examined by a doctor?" "What did they say?" Tang Fan asked. "The doctors said that he became afflicted with an ailment while in the womb, like a sort of congenital deficiency. However, it would not have a large impact on him," Zhen Ying said. "Your young master was abnormally thin and found it difficult to have children. This was most likely the result of that, right?" Tang Fan asked. "Yes." "Master Tang, what on earth is it that you're trying to say?" "If I haven't guessed incorrectly," Tang Fan said, "your young master's death is really quite strange." Zhen Ying stared at him blankly. "Why do you say such a thing?" Death by excess yang during intercourse, also known as ma shang feng, leads to sudden death if the victim is not saved in time. Doctors believe that it is caused by a deficiency of qi. On some victims, a red mark in the shape of a ring appears inside their palms. On top of the ring, one would be able to see the red of their veins as a result of inflammation. As time passes, the sight of it becomes more serious, and thus, is a certain indicator of this illness. However, when I examined your young master's palms, I did not find this symptom." Zhen Ying reacted quickly. Startled, he asked, "Are you saying that my son's death was the result of something else?" Tang Fan did not respond to this question. Instead, he continued, "If he truly died as a result of ma shang feng, then there would be traces of blood in his eyes if we pulled his eyelids open. Yet we did not find any hint of this phenomenon on your young master's body. It was for this reason that I asked Marquis of Wu'an earlier about whether or not he had a sort of illness since childhood. Though your young master's kidneys were weak, it would not lead to such a fatality. It was only because he spent his days pursuing beautiful women that it would lead others to this sort of misunderstanding." And those who misunderstood were not just one or two people. Even Zhenying himself had even believed that his own son had died as a result of succumbing to his carnal desires. Zhenying was horrified, then startled, before a look of anger flashed across his face. Who could be so daring as to harm the eldest son of mine, the Marquis of Wu'an? Earlier, when the coroner and I were investigating, we found that your young master's body was incredibly clean. There was not a single stain on him, Tang Fan said. This means that the servant girl, Alin, was not lying in her account. Just as she said, nothing happened between the two of them. Because your young master's death was not a result of death during intercourse, then it is certain that his cause of death is something else. Additionally, Alin had also said that your young master had become dizzy after taking the Fuang Chun medicine. Perhaps the real cause has to do with the medicine that I've come into possession of here. However, all of this is just my own initial conjectures. We will need to investigate this further before coming to a complete conclusion. Once he finished saying this, he asked once more, "Did your young master have an enemy that you are aware of?" Zhenying was silent after having calmed down from his anger and fear. Zheng Cheng was but a wealthy and flamboyant young master. How could he possibly have any enemies that wouldn't rest until he died? However, to say that he didn't have any at all would have been impossible. It goes without saying that Zhenying did not only have Zheng Cheng as his only child. The Marquis household was quite large, composed of 3 wives and 4 concubines, and was larger still when their sons and daughters were considered. A number of shameful secrets lurked within these women's chambers that would never see the light of day. The law of the Ming Dynasty did not strictly state that only the wife's eldest son was perfectly able to inherit a feudal title. If the first wife did not have a son, then a different son could inherit the title if they went through the process of being one conferred by the court. This would make Zheng Cheng the target of all those within the household. If he had good reputation and a bright future, then that all would be fine, but he had the gall to visit red light districts in broad daylight. How could any of his brothers accept him wholeheartedly? Moreover, with how Zheng Cheng was perfectly capable of attempting to seduce Tang Fan while the man was walking on and minding his business, then what more needs to be said of the powerless many who had received his unwarranted favor? It would not be impossible if, by chance, one of them harbored resentment and indignation and wanted to take revenge. Additionally, hedonistically rich sons of wealthy families were known to be jealous of one another's love affairs. When tensions arose, they could easily get into a fight and become enemies, which wouldn't be out of the ordinary itself. Thinking like this, the possibilities become just too many to count. One would simply have no way to just guess at one. Pan Ben watched as the other man remained silent, ruined from this news. Before speaking, Marquis of Wu'an, the moment that this took place, it almost certainly alarmed His Majesty. Until His Majesty sends out an imperial decree regarding this matter, the Shuntian Prefecture will investigate this matter clearly with all of our power, and arrest the true culprit. Zhenying nodded. Then I must entrust this to you, Master Pan. The Marquis of Wu'an grew up in the depths of a wealthy family. He had always known that there would be inner turmoil between the members of the household as they competed for favor. When they lay their hands on one another, it was unlike the soft ways of these officials who worked in the court. There were certainly a number of ruthless methods used to date that were sensationalized by the people. In the case that the true culprit was one of the members of the Zheng family, then this would be the most ridiculous case in all the land. When Zhenying thought of this, a chill fell upon his heart. The rage that he felt earlier after hearing that the culprit was most likely some other person had long faded. Chapter end.